Enough time has passed. Let's talk about the Easter eggs that Beyonce dropped in her latest interview with GQ. I didn't mean to touch her boobs. Oh my God. My name is Anish, OGB hired since 99. Don't play. We're going to talk about how this interview included a confirmation of the next tour, and I'm also going to talk about a theory on the visuals confirmation that I don't think anybody has discussed yet. First, in response to discussing family business and including manager and creative director Blue Ivy in the Renaissance tour, Beyonce starts a response to this question by saying this: I build my work schedule around my family. I try to only tour when my kids are out of school. Which makes sense. The Renaissance tour was a summer tour and it wrapped up right as the school season started. So I feel like this is a blatant confirmation that next summer, Cowboy Carter tour, whatever that is, even the tabloid from the UK called The Sun has been very boldly saying that they've been hearing rumblings of Beyonce setting stadium dates in the UK. It wouldn't be surprised. She usually starts in Europe, so Cowboy Carter tour next year. If you didn't believe that, further down into this interview, she talks about how she has been trying to focus on her health, taking her supplements, and gave up eating meat.
In order for me to meet my goal, I'm limiting myself to no bread, no carbs, no sugar, no dairy, no meat, no fish, no alcohol.
That is an excerpt from Beyonce's 2018 Beachella prep, which you can see on her Netflix Homecoming special. She always cuts out the meat and stuff when she's getting ready to perform. To me, I feel like this whole trilogy era has been a lot about history and it's about community, which is not that uncommon in Beyonce's artistry, but what I feel like is a new and major emphasis is on Beyonce's family and how she's paying tribute to different members and different parts of her family history. I'm gonna come back to this quote a lot for this 3-act theory, especially about Act 3, but I wanna start off and say that I feel like she mentioned these particular family members in this particular order for a very particular reason. Upon the release of her 2022 classic album, Act 1, Renaissance, Beyonce was pretty blatant about who she attributed this album to. Beyonce has referred to her Uncle Johnny many times before, and specifically in dedicating Renaissance to him. This is her Uncle Johnny, who she refers to as her godmother, and attributes him to exposing her to a lot of the music and the culture that this album was inspired by. Back to this quote, she goes Uncle Johnny, and then she talks about her great-grandfather. Now, let's be clear, I'm fully aware that this whole interview is to promote that Beyonce's newest business venture is this whiskey, which is called Sir Davis. She revealed that the inspiration behind the name and for coming out with a whiskey is based on her great-grandfather, Davis Hogue. For proper context, we know that Beyonce dropped her critically acclaimed Act 2, Cowboy Carter, earlier this year, and even though it's not as directly mentioned that Cowboy Carter is inspired by her great-grandfather, references to him and to whiskey are throughout the album. An American Requiem, which is the introduction track, which by the way is one of the best intro tracks to an album in the history of ever, but she talks about how she's the grandbaby of a moonshine man based in Alabama. In the popular track Bodyguard, she has a lyric that talks about Davis in her bones. Now, I'll be honest, at the time when that album came out and I heard that lyric, I was like, who's Davis? But now we know this is both in reference to her great-grandfather, but specifically about the whiskey. And then throughout the album, there's multiple references to whiskey. The lead single, Texas Hold'em, talks about whiskey. Two Hands to Heaven talks about whiskey. I mean, it's all over the place. Now, is this all a big marketing scheme for the album to reference the whiskey, for the whiskey to reference the album? Absolutely. But I do think that it is striking how intentional Beyonce has been about family in her recent business ventures. Which brings me back to this. Uncle Johnny representing Act 1, her great-grandfather representing Act 2, and her grandmother, Agnes Darion, has to be the reference and the theme for Act 3. This is a picture of Beyonce's grandmother, Agnes Darion, who was a seamstress. And if you think that that's familiar in terms of the sound, well, yes, because once upon a time in the late 2000s, Beyonce's first venture into fashion was with the fashion line House of Darion. It did have a short run in the late 2000s, like I had mentioned, and then Beyonce made a return to the fashion world with her Ivy Park line. Now, Ivy Park has had some drama with some of its previous partners, both Topshop and Adidas, those eventually falling through. But when releasing the final Ivy Park collection with Adidas, Beyonce posted this, which was to shout out the collection Ivy Park Noir, which was an all-black collection. And check out the caption. Felt great to design and wear the final Ivy Park drop with Adidas. The whole vibe of this was giving rock and roll. I mean, the materials in this collection were featuring leather, velvet, and mesh. I mean, look at this. It's giving rock and roll. And it was to the point that in late 2023, a lot of us in the Hive felt like this was an allusion to what Act 2 would have been, and we thought that Act 2 was going to be rock and roll. But we know now in late 2024 that Beyonce's Act 2 was actually Cowboy Carter, very country-inspired CMAs. So what was the reason behind Beyonce specifically referencing her grandmother as the third person in that particular quote? Well, I think that this mention of her grandmother means that with Act 3, we are going to see the revival of either the House of Darion, Ivy Park, or some amalgamation of the both into a brand new fashion line. While digging, I also found that during the launch of the House of Darion, in the Ebony magazine interview, Beyonce talked about how she loved her mother's clothes from the 70s, but specifically about her grandmother. I love clothes from the 40s, my grandmother's style, so elegant. I theorize that Act 3 is actually going to be all about like her grandmother's aesthetic, which would include, according to Wikipedia, the popular music in the 1940s includes jazz, big band, and swing. And when I looked up the origins of rock and roll, it derived most directly from rhythm and blues music from the 1940s, which was developed from earlier blues, the beat-heavy jump blues, boogie-woogie, up-tempo jazz, and swing music. I think that Act 3 is going to be a combo. We're going to get a hybrid of jazz and rock and roll in there, and I think it's going to be some type of music we ain't never heard before. Now, before I go, I want to address the visuals like I had told you. A lot of the fans have been talking about this whole, you are the visual baby. We all got the visual on tour, and then we got the visuals from the film, which also, I have a whole theory on how Renaissance is never going to go to streaming. I think it's interesting that she didn't flat out say, no, there are no visuals. I mean, I actually am a believer in that the plan did not go accordingly. I think that we were probably supposed to get visuals upon release. We did get that teaser for I'm That Girl when Renaissance came out. The stuff that we see from the lyric videos from Cowboy Carter is definitely giving visual. But while she said, we are the visual baby, she also ended the interview with this line. I also edit for fun. I genuinely enjoy it. Girl, I'm clocking your T, sis. What are you editing? Huh? And in that quote, you were also talking about how you love to design stages and all that stuff. Like, I already been said it. The tour is coming next year. But you love to edit. What are you editing? Huh? I think that the visuals do exist and they are going to come out. I think that they are going to come out well after Act 3 has been released. Like, it's clear that she wants us to get some time to really invest in the music. I totally get it. I have a feeling that it's going to be streaming on Amazon Prime because of all those talks that we heard about. And I think that it's going to come, like, let's say if Act 3 comes out at the beginning of 2026, I think towards the end of the year is when we'll see the visuals. But we're going to get it, Hive. We're going to get it.